Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivara Dhari Jaya Girivara Dhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivara Dhari Jaya Girivara Dhari Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Brajajana Ranjana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Brajajana Ranjana Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की श्रीला प्रभुपाद की समवेद भक्त वृंद की जय निताई गौर प्रेमानंदे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we are reading from Canto 6, Chapter 16. Chapter 16 is entitled King Chitraketu Meets the Lord, and today we are on text 7. Nityasyarthasya sambandho Nityasyarthasya sambandho Hi anityo drishyate nrishu Hi anitya nitya drishyate nrishu Yavadyasya hi sambandho Yavadyasya hi sambandho Mamatvam tavadeva hi Mamatvam tavadeva hi Nityasarthasya sambandho Hi anityo drishyate nrishu Yavadyasya hi sambandho Mamatvam tavadeva hi Nityasyarthasya sambandho Hi anityo drishyate nrishu Yavadyasya hi sambandho Mamatvam tavadeva hi Nityasya of the eternal, Arthasya thing, Sambandha relationship, He indeed, Anitya temporary, Drishyate is seen, Nrishu in human society, Yavat as long as, Yasya of whom, He indeed, Sambandha relationship, Mamatvam ownership, Tavat that long, Eva indeed, He certainly. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Translation. A few living entities are born in the human species and others are born as animals. Although both are living entities, their relationships are impermanent. An animal may remain in the custody of a human being for some time. and then the same animal may be transferred to the possession of other human beings. As soon as the animal goes away, the former proprietor no longer has a sense of ownership. As long as the animal is in his possession, he certainly has an affinity for it. But as soon as the animal is sold, the affinity is lost. Purport. Aside from the fact that the soul transmigrates from one body to another, even in this life, the relationships between living entities are impermanent, as exemplified in this verse. The son of Chitraketu was named Harsha Shokha, or jubilation and lamentation. The living entity is certainly eternal, but because he is covered by a temporary dress, the body, his eternity is not observed. Dehi nosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yovanam jara. The embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age. Thus, the bodily dress is impermanent. The living entity, however, is permanent. As an animal is transferred from one owner to another, the living entity, who was the son of Chitraketu, lived as his son for some time. But as soon as he was transferred to another body, the affectionate relationship was broken. As stated in the example given in the previous verse, when one has a commodity in his hands, he considers it his. But as soon as it is transferred, it becomes someone else's commodity. Then one no longer has a relationship with it. He has no affection for it, nor does he lament for it. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayyam Dadati Swapadantikam Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaiva cha. Mara Chitraketu and his wives were lamenting over their dead son. They got a son, but then he died, untimely death, obviously because he was poisoned by the other wives who were jealous of this main wife who was able to bear the son. And we see that Mara Chitraketu and the wife, who was the mother of that child, were lamenting piteously over that son. And at that time in the previous chapter, Narad Muni and Angira Muni arrive over there to give some instructions to Mara Chitraketu. And when they are giving instructions, they are actually telling him, they are giving him knowledge of the body and soul, they are giving him knowledge of the impermanent nature of things in this material world, they are giving him knowledge about detachment, they are giving him knowledge of the higher purpose of human form of life, and they are also giving him knowledge of the transmigration of the soul, how it goes from one body to the other. And while giving those instructions, they are also telling him, they are saying that we could have given you the same instructions before also, when we came to meet you the first time. Because you are an eternal child of the Lord, you are a devotee of the Lord, and we could have given these instructions to you at that time, but you were not ready for those instructions. Because you were so absorbed in material affairs, you were so engrossed and attached to the conception of getting a son, that you would not have received these instructions from us. You first wanted your full desire to be fulfilled, and then only you would have become receptive. So that is why we had to fulfill your desire. We had to grant you a child, even though in your destiny there was no child written. But we granted it to you because if we would have told you that don't worry about a child, focus on the purpose of your life, focus on becoming a devotee of Krishna, focus on going back to the Lord after death, focus on your eternal life after death. But you would not have been receptive to that. And therefore, we had to first give you a child, and we had to, through your child, make you detached from this world. In fact, once, I was listening to a class by Jagatarini Mataji, and she was mentioning that this whole concept of what Narad Muni and Angira Muni also are, utilizing with Maharaj Chitraketu. So she was saying that, we as devotees also, we are practicing devotees, obviously. So we are, especially again speaking of myself, we are not on that platform yet, where we don't have any desires at all. And Mataji was saying that it is very important to introspect. Devotees should continuously introspect in their heart. And they should see if they have any inner desires which they really want to be fulfilled. And that desire might be anything. It might be maybe for wealth, it might be for prestige, it might be for a house, it might be for children. So she was saying it's very important to introspect continuously on any inner desires that might be still there in your heart. And she was saying that we should not artificially try to give them up. And Prabhupada mentions this in many purports of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. He says that even when he speaks of austerity, he says that, a person can do only that much austerity which is equivalent to his purity. So if somebody tries to imitate somebody who's very austere, now every devotee has a different strength. And, every devotee has their unique quality which they can offer to Krishna, their unique skill, their unique value, their unique talent which they can offer to Krishna. So some devotees might be, very good in deity dressing, some devotees might be good in giving classes, some devotees sing beautifully, some devotees cook very nicely for Krishna, some devotees are very detached, they are very austere, some devotees do very good japa. So like that, every devotee has a different quality which they offer to Krishna, which they utilize in the Lord's service. So Prabhupada also says that, sometimes when we see some devotee has that quality of being very austere, like we see many devotees, they do nirjal. Every Ekadashi, they do nirjal. Or some devotees can get up at 2:30 every day in the morning to chant. Or some devotees are very detached in terms of, generally living a very simple life. If you see their house, very simple, they might not even have a car. They might be surviving without a car. Or they might be having, if you see their clothes, very simple, very detached devotees. So sometimes we, in trying to, we get inspired when we see these devotees and we actually try to emulate them. However, Prabhupada says that you will not be able to sustain the austerity unless the purity is there in your heart. Both of them go hand in hand. So in the same way, Jagatarini Mataji was trying to say that we will not be able to transcend these desires or, artificially we will not be able to give them up unless the heart has become purified. So she says, obviously, have a glance into your heart, see what desires are there and try to transcend them naturally through the purifying process of devotional service. Because devotional service, there is a verse in the Bhagavatam which says that devotional service or chanting of the holy names of the Lord is so potent, it is purifying like the sun. So it not only burns up the desires from the heart, but it also uproots any weeds which might be there, and even it uproots it from the roots. It completely uproots it. It's not that, it's just like the elephants bathing. Prabhupada talks about Christianity and how they have that confession box and many Christians go to church to do their Sunday confession. But Prabhupada says, what is the use? They go on Sunday, they confess in front of the priest who is there inside that confession box, but then Monday to Saturday again they are doing the same activity. And he calls it as elephants bathing. He says an elephant goes and takes a nice bath in a big river, and then he comes out and he wallows in the mud, and he's again dirty all over again. So he says, what is the use of that sort of, trying to purify yourself in that way, which is artificial? So Prabhupada says, and Mataji was saying, Jagatarini Mataji is saying that it is very important that we transcend them to the purificatory process of devotional service. And it can completely uproot all desires. However, till that time, Mataji was saying that one should recognize that, yes, I have these desires in my life, and if they are not contrary to devotional life, then fulfill them. Because like I said, if we artificially try to suppress them or we artificially try to give them up, they are going to sprout up later in life. And they are going to, make us, if we have not transcended them, they are going to trouble us towards the end of life. And that time we might want to fulfill that desire. Somebody likes to dress up well, let's say. So then try to fulfill it. If it's not contrary to devotional service, try to fulfill it while you're young. Otherwise, in old age, you might want to do all those things. So you see, they'll come to bite you. And that is what Mataji was trying to explain. That if you have desires, recognize, yes, I do have these desires. I'm not a pure devotee yet. And obviously, there is the process of purification which will definitely work. But in the meantime, do work on those desires and fulfill them if they are not contrary to your devotional life. They don't put a hindrance in your devotional life. And Krishna will eventually ensure, because the Lord is there. He is not like the shopkeeper. So whenever, in Bhakti Vriksha programs also, these are some of the first lessons we give, what this dead son who has come back is giving. That you are not the body, you are the soul. These relationships are temporary. We are come together for some time, but then you go on your own path. Transmigration. These are some of the initial concepts which are spoken about in Bhakti Vriksha programs. And over there also we give the example of, the difference between demigod worship and worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we know this shloka from Bhagavatam, akama sarva kamo va moksha kamo udaridhi. Tivrena bhakti yogena yajjeta purusham param. That whether you are full of material desires or you are free of material desires or you moksha kama, you desire liberation, whatever is your desire, go and approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Do not approach anybody else. And that is what, we try to explain when we talk about demigod worship, approaching the demigods. Because if we see, when you approach the demigods, they give you whatever is already there in your karma bank, in your quota. That is what they are trying to give to you. So if you approach them for wealth, they will give you that wealth if it is there in your quota. If you approach them for a big house, you approach them for a good position or, or a job in office, they will give it to you if it's there in your quota. However, the difference of approaching the Supreme Lord is, He might give it to you if it's there, if it's going to be good for you, but He will eventually help you to get purified of that desire. And that is the biggest benefit of approaching the Supreme Lord. Krishna personally intervenes in the life of the devotee. And He will definitely help us overcome that desire which is there. Or He will fulfill the desire in such a way that we will not have that desire again. Like He might give you, you have a desire for a big house or something, He might give it to you, but ultimately He will give it to you in such a way that you will say, Krishna, sorry, I made this desire, please, I don't want it anymore. So that is the benefit, and that is what Jagatareni Mataji was explaining in that class, that, do that introspection if we have any desires. And we see Narad Muni and Angari Muni also following the same principle with Maharaj Chitraketu. They fulfilled his desire. They gave him that child, because they knew that this child will now, they fulfilled it in such a way that after that Chitraketu Maharaj would become detached, but not before that desire was fulfilled. So having given a son, Narad Muni and Angira Muni actually come back, and they are, they have come back when the son has actually left the father and gone away. And they have come there to purify him of the desire now, to give him these higher instructions of life. And after giving these instructions, we once again see Narad Muni's brilliance over here in preaching. So Narad Muni is actually called as the Bhakti Shakti of the Lord. He is a pure devotee who's always trying to make others very, very compassionate. And he's always trying to bring others to the lotus feet of the Lord. So, contrary to what is shown usually in, some popular serials or in some TV shows or in some movies where it shows Narad Muni says Narayan, Narayan, but he's always there to do jagda or, make devotees fight. But that is, there is a deeper understanding to that. And sometimes, all these popular shows or TV serials don't show that aspect of Narad Muni. But the innermost intention and desire of Narad Muni is, based on compassion for everybody who's suffering in this world. He wants everyone to go back to the spiritual world. So Narad Muni is an expert preacher. We can see once again through this example. And he follows the principle of different strokes for different folks. That is what he follows. So for every unique situation, every unique person, he has a unique way of preaching. And we see even Srila Prabhupada used to follow in the example of Narad Muni always. Srila Prabhupada would use different techniques to spread Krishna consciousness. Now if we see Srila Prabhupada, there in the 1896 he was born. He was, from the previous age almost we say, when there was so much culture still prevalent in India. He was born in Calcutta, and Bengalis are generally where he was born, that too in a Brahmin family. So they're very cultured people. So Prabhupada was born in those circumstances, but we see that when he came to the West, he was such an expert preacher. He preached according to time, place, circumstance, and he completely, utilized or used a unique way of preaching for every situation that he was on. So he never compromised on the philosophy or the principles of Krishna consciousness, but the way he delivered it was different for different people, so that it would penetrate the heart of his audience. In fact, Prabhupada had to deal with so many different types of people who were coming in the initial days. It is said that, when Prabhupada gave initiation, obviously Prabhupada said that I had that urgency to start this society, to spread this movement, to give initiation to these, young boys and girls, so that they would further spread Krishna consciousness in the world. So Prabhupada had given initiation, and Prabhupada saw that in the early days, some of these people, after, being in the temple and initiation, they had gone to the local coffee shop to have coffee and donuts. So slowly Prabhupada had to introduce all the 4 regulative principles, no meat, no tea, coffee, no onion, garlic, all these aspects. Prabhupada only eating prasadam. Prabhupada had to slowly introduce all these things. In fact, Prabhupada, when he was preaching in San Francisco, for example, when he had gone there, the devotees wanted to take Prabhupada to, because obviously the hippie era was going on that time, drugs, everything, counterculture was going on in America at that time. And there used to be like every Friday or something, there used to be program that used to happen in a ballroom. And they used to call it the banana dance. So Prabhupada was invited to such a program. And Prabhupada, when he entered, so first Prabhupada questioned the devotees, what happens there? And they said, oh, all these hippies come together and they have, music and dance and all these sorts of things. And obviously there is smoking, there is drugs, marijuana, all these things. Prabhupada said, okay, but will they allow us to do kirtan? And they said, yeah, they like music, so they will allow us to do. Prabhupada said, okay, then we will go to preach over there. So when Prabhupada entered that ballroom, there was a lot of smoke coming. And that smoke was not from agarbatti, not from incense. The smoke was all from, people doing drugs and all. And Prabhupada also saw on the stage, there were some people in yellow dress who were dancing. And Prabhupada said, what is this? And they said, oh, this is called as the banana dance. And then, obviously Prabhupada is from Calcutta. He is coming from India where there was so much culture at that time. He was brought up in a very cultured family by his parents very nicely. So Prabhupada was not aware what is this thing happening. So Prabhupada asked, what is this banana dance? And the disciples told Prabhupada that all these people, they actually burn banana peels and they inhale that because that gives them that high, the effect of a drug. What drugs give them, maybe drugs are expensive, so they use these banana peels and they burn them and they use. In fact, Prabhupada, they are saying that they are ready to donate every week 1 full box, crate of bananas, but their only condition is that we give the peels back to them, so that they can burn and use them as drugs. And Prabhupada would utilize everything in Krishna's service. So we see Prabhupada had to use such different methods to get the message across to them. In fact, it is said in the early days, like, I was listening again in a class, like Prahladananda Maharaj was reminiscing. And Prahladananda Maharaj said that I had just come into the movement at that time. And I went into the temple because I wanted to join the temple. And the pujari who was there, who was worshipping the deities, he actually saw, okay, one new devotee has come and he wanted to go somewhere else. Prabhupada, I think, wanted him to do another service of preaching and opening another center. So he gave the key of the temple to Prahladananda Maharaj and he said, now you take care of the deities. And Prahladananda Maharaj said, I have just arrived, I don't know what has to be done. And he said, oh, it's very simple, don't worry at all. What you have to do is 6 times in a day you have to offer this arti to the deities and you offer these items. So he showed him agarbatti, the ghee lamp, chamara, water, flowers, kerchief, all that. So he said, you show this and 6 times in a day you have to do. And Prahladananda Maharaj said, okay. So the first time he went in the altar and he started doing arti and he offered the incense and then he realized, oh, I didn't ask him how much time should I keep offering the incense. So Maharaj says that the first time when I did the arti, I offered every item for half an hour. So for incense, he would keep doing for half an hour. Then he would offer the lamp for half an hour. Then he would offer the water for half an hour and so on. And then he realized, oh, this first arti itself took 2.5 hours. And if I have to do 6 artis, obviously I'm going to be in the altar only the whole day. So, later on he got the knowledge from Srila Prabhupada. And during that time, the mode of communication was just letters. There was no emailing system that time. Internet had not even come. There were no mobile phones. Nothing like that was there. So Prabhupada would communicate just through letters with everybody. And it is said during Prabhupada's time, while he was on this planet going around and preaching, it's recorded there are hardly few phone calls he has made. Because even doing a trunk call was so expensive. And Prabhupada was very diligent about spending money. So there was hardly during, very crucial moments, like during the whole Juhu temple thing, he had to make some phone call like that. Very few phone calls Prabhupada has made. Otherwise, all his preaching used to happen through letters. So the letter would reach the devotee, then the devotee would reply, then Prabhupada would write the letter. So like that, all the preaching Prabhupada did through letters, and still he created this whole society. And he instructed Prahaladana Maharaj through the letter how to do the arti. In fact, in another temple, it is said Prabhupada was planning to visit that temple soon. And, they had beautiful deities. Gaur-Nitai deities had already been installed in that temple. And Prabhupada was planning to go there soon. And the devotees were very inspired that, oh, we want to worship Lord Jagannath also. And we want to show Prabhupada that we are worshipping Lord Jagannath before he comes. So they made Jagannath deities and they installed them on the altar. They wanted to install rather on the altar. But their altar was very small. It was a small temple. In the early days, we know how all temples were in some small houses or rooms or something like that. So it was a very small temple, and there was place on the altar only for one deity, which is Gaur-Nitai. So then what the devotees said, okay, how do we install Jagannath? So they used their ingenuity and they made a revolving altar. So, if you press a button, Gaur-Nitai will give darshan. Then if you press a button, it will revolve and Jagannath will give darshan. So that is how the devotees improvised. And when Prabhupada came, they showed that to Prabhupada. Prabhupada, we are worshipping both deities. See, when we, if you press this, you can have Gaur-Nitai darshan. And then if you press, it will revolve and you can have Jagannath darshan. And then Prabhupada had to explain to them that no, if you have deities, they have to be installed in one place. You don't make them into a revolving altar, and they have to give darshan all the time to devotees. So like that, we see Prabhupada had to use so many different techniques to preach the message of Krishna consciousness to his disciples, especially in the early days. So he never compromised on the philosophy or the principles, but he would use different techniques, following the footsteps of Narad Muni. And that's what we see Narad Muni also doing over here. Such a unique way he has utilized of bringing this child actually back into the body. The soul who had left and gone, Maharaj Chitraketu's son, because they gave instructions to Maharaj Chitraketu, but they realized, Angira Muni and Narad Muni realized that we will have to do something more to, completely embed this message in Maharaj Chitraketu's mind, that obviously don't lament for your son, dead son who's gone. And, through these examples, they knew that dead son, if he preaches to the parents, that will bring more detachment and peace in the heart of the parents. And therefore, here he is using this unique concept of bringing the child back to life. So we see the expertise of Narad Muni. He's always utilizing different methodologies to get the message of detachment, to get the message of, devotional life is the goal of life, devotional service is the goal. To get these messages across, he's just using these different methodologies. And we see a similar example of how devotees deal with a similar situation in their lives. So we see in the pages of Chaitanya Charitamrita this whole... Sorry. So in the pages of Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is this description of a very similar pastime. So we know Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to do kirtans, day and night kirtans in Srivas Angan, in Srivas Thakur's house. He used to do day kirtans. They started with day kirtans, and then the devotees requested that why are we wasting time in the night and just sleeping? Mahaprabhu, can we do kirtan at night as well? So they started their night kirtans also. And every day the devotees would be in ecstasy because Mahaprabhu himself was over there dancing, singing, chanting amongst all the devotees in Srivas Angan. So once when Mahaprabhu was doing this kirtan, he was the son of Srivas Thakur actually died. And there was a lot of, obviously, because he died untimely, like this. You know how Maharaj Chitraketu's son died untimely, like that. Srivas Thakur's son also died untimely. And obviously the relatives, especially the ladies of the house, his wife, grandmother, everybody, his mother, everybody was lamenting because the child had died and passed away. And Srivas Thakur could hear that during the kirtan that they have started crying and something has happened. So he goes inside, he sees his own child has died, and he sees all these, you know, his wife and his mother and everybody, all the other ladies, relatives crying. And you know what he tells them? The reaction is completely different to what we see over here of Maharaj Chitraketu. Maharaj Chitraketu has broken down. He's lamenting that a son should not leave before the father. It is the, you know, son who has to take the father on the asthi and, you know, give cremation to the father, not the other way around. Oh, Providence, what have you done? We saw all these lamentation of Maharaj Chitraketu and his wife in the previous chapters. But Srivas Thakur, contrary to that, the pure devotee that he was, he actually told the relatives. He said that there is kirtan going on in this house. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is personally present and singing and dancing in this house. What could have been a more auspicious way to depart from this world than in the presence of this kirtan, that too Chaitanya, in the presence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. So I want all of you all to stop crying right now because it will disturb Mahaprabhu's kirtan. But if you all continue crying, I will give up my life. Next you all will see me lying dead over here. So these are the heavy instructions which Srivas Thakur gives to all the relatives. And you know, we can see the contrast of how somebody who's very attached behaves when, you know, somebody dies, and somebody who's, you know, completely detached and who's a pure devotee, they behave when they lose their near and dear ones. And it gives us inspiration on, you know, following in the footsteps of these devotees when we have to deal with the matter of death of our near and dear ones. So we see Narad Muni is utilizing this unique way of bringing the dead child back to life so that the parents can hear from the child some instructions as the final way to get detached, as the final way to come out of their lamentation, and as the final way to then realize that, okay, now we have to dedicate our lives to becoming devotees and not keep aspiring on lamenting for having a child. And we see Narad Muni's unique needs in different ways. Like I was saying, different strokes for different folks. Very, very excellent and expert preacher to somehow give bhakti. So I was just going through the various cantos of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam and trying to remember how Narad Muni used different ways of preaching to different people. And we see in the first canto of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, at the very beginning of the Bhagavatam, we see Narad Muni arrives where Vyasadeva is sitting in despondency. Because Vyasadeva had written all the Vedas, he had written so many scriptures, but he was still not feeling satisfied in his heart. And at that time, Narad Muni, his guru, arrives over there. And Narad Muni is immediately able to recognize the cause of the despondency of Vyasadeva. And according to Vyasadeva's nature, he knows he is the literary incarnation of Lord. He knows he is here to actually write literatures glorifying the Lord. So there, his instruction to Vyasadeva was that you haven't glorified the Supreme Personality of Godhead enough. You haven't written about his pastimes enough. You haven't written about pure devotional service enough. And that is why you're feeling this restlessness and this dissatisfaction in your heart, even though you've written so many scriptures. So that's the instruction he gives to Vyasadeva. So, but for Narad Muni, we wouldn't have had this literature, great literature, to read on, to read about, you know, to understand the glories of devotional service. It wouldn't have been there with us had Narad Muni not instructed Vyasadeva in the first canto of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. And then we move on, we see in fourth canto, the famous pastime of Dhruv Maharaj is there. And with Dhruv Maharaj, what technique Narad Muni uses to preach to him? Because he knew Dhruv Maharaj is a Kshatriya. And Kshatriyas are hot-blooded people. So he knew Dhruv Maharaj will not get satisfied just by ordinary instructions. Oh, don't worry about, you know, aspiring for a throne and all that. He knew that he will have to somehow, you know, test Dhruv Maharaj and actually challenge him, because Kshatriyas take up challenges. So he tells Dhruv Maharaj that you're a little child. You won't be able to do all these austerities in the forest. You just go home and enjoy. You have a big kingdom. Your father is the king. You have so much opulence, so much comfort. Just go home and enjoy all those things. When you're big, you think about this. So, you know, when Kshatriyas are challenged, they take it up. And Dhruv Maharaj says, no, I cannot go back now. I have felt insulted and I want to aspire. I want a kingdom which is greater than my father. Because I can't tolerate that he did not allow me to sit. And on top of that, my stepmother pushed me away from the lap. And she said, you have to take birth from my womb. So I cannot tolerate that. If you can, you give me instructions on how to achieve that. So Narad Muni then gives him the instructions. He gives him the mantra to, you know, worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we see then Dhruv Maharaj, just with the darshan of the Lord, he gets purified. And he doesn't want any kingdom or anything more, but the Lord still grants it to him. But we see Narad Muni using a different technique because Dhruv Maharaj was a Kshatriya in the 4th canto. And in the same canto, we also see him preaching to King Prachina Bharishad. So King Prachina Bharishad was very steeped in, you know, doing yagyas, animal sacrifices, following Vedic rituals, and he was sacrificing too many animals. And that time he wanted to, you know, get that message across to King Prachina Bharishad that do not waste your time and do not do animal sacrifices and animal killing. So he actually shows all those dead animals whom Maharaj Prachina Bharishad had sacrificed in the fire. He shows them in the sky. And he says, can you see these animals? They are all waiting eagerly for your death so that they can torture you in the same way you tortured them during your animal sacrifices. And not only, you know, using that technique, Narad Muni then gives him the whole allegory of King Puranjana. Just to show him, the, you know, the how to become detached and how he should not be so steeped in all these things and how, you know, death is awaiting everybody in this material world. So over there, Narad Muni uses the, you know, preaching technique of using allegories to drive the message across. And also he then, you know, instructs the sons. He goes and instructs the Prachetas. There are beautiful instructions. The Prachetas were highly elevated devotees. So with elevated devotees, he just gives them some nice, you know, instructions on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then we come to Canto 5. And in Canto 5, we see the Canto 5 starts with Maharaj Priyavrata. And Maharaj Priyavrata, obviously, Uttanapad's pastime was over. Brother was Maharaj Priyavrata. And because of Narad Muni's expert preaching, Priyavrata had left the kingdom and he did not want to get entangled in, you know, looking after a kingdom or getting married. He was actually a brahmachari. And he had given up his whole kingdom. He had given up the fact that I'm a king's son and I should be the next ruler or anything like that. He did not want anything to do with the material world. So that was the expert preaching of Narad Muni to Maharaj Priyavrata. So only because Maharaj Priyavrata was then required to rule the kingdom, Brahma comes, and because obviously Narad Muni's father is Brahma, he listens to Brahma and he allows Maharaj Priyavrata to go back and rule the kingdom. But Maharaj Priyavrata still did it with the full instructions of Narad Muni in a very, like he was a Raj Rishi, in a very devotional way he ruled his whole kingdom. And we also see in Canto 6, which is this canto, he went and preached to Daksha's sons. We know earlier in the canto, we read that whole pastime. He, you know, 10,000 sons of Daksha, he made them devotees. Again, Daksha had, you know, another set of sons, made them into devotees. Then Daksha curses him. But Narad Muni doesn't care about these curses. He, in fact, happily accepted the curse that you will not have a residence anywhere. You will have to keep roaming in this world. He actually turned it into a benefit on how he can, you know, keep roaming around and spread Krishna consciousness to others. So we see Narad Muni, you know, expertly preaching to Daksha's sons. In Canto 7, then we move on, we see him preaching to Prahlad Maharaj. And, you know, with Prahlad Maharaj, he didn't waste time. He knew that there is, you know, devotee in the womb of Kayadhu. He saved Kayadhu from the demigods because the demigods were going to kill the child. And he takes her to his ashram. And wasting, no, not even, okay, let Prahlad Maharaj be born, then I will preach. He starts preaching to Prahlad Maharaj in the womb itself. So again, you know, different stroke over here because he knew Prahlad Maharaj as a devotee. Just by, he knew he will not get this precious time with Kayadhu because that time Hiranyakashipu was doing austerity. So he knew he won't get this time. And therefore he, without wasting time, he preaches while Kayadhu is pregnant to the baby in the womb, to the child in the womb. And that made Prahlad Maharaj such a great devotee of the Lord. That he, you know, became, he preaches to his father. Narsimhadev himself appeared because he was such a great devotee. And like this we see, even in Canto 10, we see Narad Muni entering so many different pastimes of Lord Krishna. He comes and tells Kamsa that why don't you, the number 8 could be from any side. So he actually wanted the Lord to appear quickly, and he instigates Kamsa to kill all the children so that the Lord would come. He also, enters the Dwarka Lila of the Lord, and he instigates some fights between Satyabhama and the Lord so that, there is a sweet pastime that happens. Even with the gopis, he, tries to bring out sweet pastimes of the Lord. So we see Narad Muni is such an expert preacher. Over here, he has come to preach, not only give instructions, but use the unique way of bringing the child back. And in every canto, we see him using different ways of preaching. And in this pastime, we are saying why he had to use this unique way of bringing a dead child back. So he was preaching about death, he was preaching about the impermanence of life, and he was trying to tell about the permanent life which awaits everybody, the eternal life which awaits everybody after death. So we see that he's, death is a concept which is very hard to accept. And we see that happening here with Maharaj Chitraketu and his wife. So sometimes it is easy to accept the concept of death for your own self, but it is much more difficult to accept the concept of death for our near and dear ones. It becomes very hard, especially for, parents, the husband for the wife, or the wife for the husband, or for the children. It becomes very hard to accept that concept. Many times people say, like, I remember once, in 2005 when we were doing a Bhakti Vriksha program, there was a lady, like one of Prabhu's office colleague had come also for that program. And we were talking about the concept of death, like the 4 problems of life. We were talking about Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi. And that time, this lady was challenging, I am not afraid of death. And we see the freedom fighters of India, like, Subhash Chandra Bose and all these freedom fighters, they actually went smilingly to the gallows. So they were not afraid of death. So how can we call death as a problem? And then, we had to tell that, okay, you are not afraid for your own death, or some people might want to sacrifice their lives for the betterment of others. But what about the death of your near and dear ones? So she had a daughter, and we said, what if something happens to your child? And then she started crying, oh, no, nothing should happen to my child. So we see everybody, it's sometimes easier to accept your own death, because for you things are over. After death, you are whether you did devotional life or whatever you did in your life, you are going to get a next body accordingly. But it's the harder life is then for people who are left behind. So it's, difficult to accept death of our near and dear ones. So we see that this concept of death, it is an inevitable, mysterious conclusion of what we know as life. And it brings, it's the final, death has such finality to it that everything that we were doing in this life, the house we were building, or whatever, some aspirations we were having to rise in the corporate life, or to have children, or to make our children well settled, or make our grandchildren well settled, everything comes to an end with the concept of death. So we see man continuously sees that there is death happening all around him, but it is very difficult for a person to accept this concept of death. In fact, Maharaj Yudhishthir, when he was questioned by the Yaksha, there was this whole pastime which happens, the Yaksha has killed the other Pandavas, and Maharaj Yudhishthir is now being questioned by the Yaksha, and he says, if you answer my questions correctly, I'll give you your brothers back. And one of the questions the Yaksha asks is, what is the most wondrous or astonishing thing that you can see in this world? And Yudhishthir Maharaj replies at that time that the most wondrous thing I can see is that there is death happening all around in this world. But still a person feels that it's not going to happen to him. They still keep living their lives as if they are not going to meet with death at the end of their lives. And that is the most astonishing thing. And Prabhupada gives the example of a goat outside a slaughterhouse. So, goats are tied to be taken into the slaughterhouse, and they are given some grass to eat. And they are so busy eating the grass that they are not realizing one by one the goats in front of them have been taken in and they have not come out. They are being slaughtered because they are busy in their own affairs, in their own material affairs of eating the grass. So that is what Yudhishthir Maharaj says, that everybody sees death happening, but people are so absorbed that they think it will not happen to them. And they keep living this life as if it's the all in all and the permanent life. So we see, in fact, Prabhupada also used to question this many times, that human society, we are so engrossed in solving the problems of life. We are engrossed in solving the problem of hunger. We are engrossed in solving the problem of technology. Like we use technology, we use science, we use advancement of, the brain of humans in trying to bring new inventions in this world to solve so many problems of life. And education is also geared, if we see universities, the education is geared in just preparing people to solve the problems of life. If somebody is, being educated to become a lawyer, obviously one would not go to a lawyer unless one has a problem. Somebody has somebody has done murder somebody, or there is, some land dispute going on, or there is a divorce that is happening, some family dispute. Obviously, these lawyers are there to solve that problems of life which people face. Doctor. Would anybody go to a doctor unless there's a problem, health problem? So we see in universities, education is given just to solve the problems of life through different methods of science, technology, economics, finance, all these degrees which are given to people. But Prabhupada always would challenge. He would say that where is that department in the university which is teaching about death, which is teaching about soul, which is teaching about life after death, and what to do to solve the problem of death? Because, so many scientists, everybody, there's so much advancement happening in science, there's so much advancement happening in medicine, but none of these, researchers, none of these doctors, nobody has been able to solve the problem of death. We might have solved many problems, and it's kudos, like it's a big thing that human society is progressing and we've solved so many problems, but no one has been able to solve this particular problem. And no one is even focusing on the problem that, yes, death is going to happen and what should be the solution. What happens after death? No one is solving that. In fact, Jesus Christ, when he had come here, he had come to talk about, and he actually says, that what is the use of living this life if you have not prepared for eternal life after death? And the same message Prophet Muhammad also came and gave. So, somebody might challenge. Somebody might say that I don't believe in life after death. We see many people talk like that. I don't believe in life after death. I don't believe in the existence of God. I feel that this life is all in all. Live it nicely, and everything is finished when you die. But they don't realize that there have been so many philosophers, so many great saints, so many sages who have come over centuries. And they have come thousands of years apart, but they have still given the same message to us about the non-permanence of this life, how this life is not all in all, how there is something else after life, there is an eternal life you can aspire for after death, and how to solve this problem of death in your life, which no university has been able to teach. And the real education, if you see, all these educated people who get educated at universities in big degrees, the real education is not just to reject all these philosophers like Madhvacharya, Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Jesus Christ, Prophet Muhammad, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In different cultures, all these big saints and sages and the Lord himself has come to give the message. And real education is to have an open mind, to have an open heart, to be receptive to knowledge from some other sources, and not just be closed like a horse. Those two things are put around the horse and they don't see anything else. Not to be close to the fact that whatever I am thinking and whatever my conceptions are about life, that is the final conception. Because we see there is a proverb in English which says, sure as death. So death is a surety which nobody can solve, nobody can transcend it. And that is why real education, Prabhupada says, is to have these departments in universities which will actually teach about the permanent life which exists, the eternal life which exists after death. So we see, if we are wanting to take this knowledge, if we are wanting to prepare ourselves for life after death, we do have to be receptive to the solution that these sages and these philosophers are offering to us about the solution, about what can be done after death, and we see Narad Muni doing that with Maharaj Chitraketu. So further we will see, once this child instructs on the non-permanence of life, on the non-permanence of relationships. In fact, the child, in the first verse, when the child starts speaking, he talks about river. And he says, just as, on the river there are things floating, like straws are floating, they come together for some time and they separate and go their different ways. And the second example he gives is of commodities, like how commodity keeps changing, like, money keeps changing hands, commodities keep changing hands, and the owner who had that commodity for some time no longer can claim proprietorship over that commodity. And the third example that child gives is today. In today's verse, he's talking about how about an animal which is possessed by the owner. So, if a cow is there, or a buffalo, or a bullock, or a goat, or whatever like that, and they are then sold in the market, then the owner doesn't have any affiliation or ownership, and he will not keep crying. Okay, you sold it, and that animal has now gone somewhere else. So these are the instructions we see this particular child coming and giving. And he's giving these instructions based on Narad Muni's empowerment to him. And we see that, generally, like Prabhupada was challenging universities, even schools, they shy away from educating on all these aspects of life. They shy away from educating on the concept of death. Because, even in offices we see, we have to be positive, do not talk about negative things, let's focus on what is, the bright side of things. But if you don't focus on this aspect, it's going to happen to you. It's not that it's not going to happen to you. And we see there are so many examples, like we see Maharaj Chitraketu lamenting over here, but we saw the example of Srivas Thakur. But we know examples even on our current life, in our own society of Krishna consciousness in ISKCON, of devotees who have accepted death in such a beautiful and nice way. They have embraced death in their lives. So there is a beautiful example of Kirtida, Mother Kirtida, who was Prabhupada's disciple. And the way she left her body, it's such an exemplary way for all of, because we are discussing about the concept of death, it is such an exemplary way for all of us to understand how to prepare for death, how to be ready when this, this sure as hair, death thing will come knocking at our doors. So Maharaj Kirtida, I was reading about her, and it is described that she was born in South Africa and she was trained to be a nurse over there. And later on she moves to US. And it said that she had so many health problems since young age, and she had undergone so many surgeries that majority of her stomach had been removed. And most of the time she had to be on intravenous food, like through tubes she had to be fed. And because of some infections which kept happening because of the tubes, so many tubes that were inserted in her, it said that almost 3 or 4 times she was about to leave her body. And somehow she survived. And then she became so fed up that she actually wanted to commit suicide. And she had moved to Dallas from there. And in Dallas we have the Radha Kalachandji deities, very beautiful deities. So somehow she had come in contact with devotees, somehow little bit she has started coming in Krishna consciousness. And she actually was thinking of committing suicide because she was fed up of all the health problems that were there. So it said that she actually went to the deities and she wanted to take permission from them. That I know it is not a good thing, it's a sin to take your own life, but there's so many health problems, what can I do? So please give me permission, I'm going to end my life. And she described in a book that later on the deities revealed to her that you have not, brought yourself in this world. You have no right to take your life away also then. Like you didn't bring your own self in this world, you didn't give life to yourself, so you don't have any right over taking away your own life. And you have higher purposes to fulfill, so do not commit suicide. And when that message was received by her, she continued her devotional service. Eventually, she took initiation from Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj told her, because she would do so many services, but she also continued working as a nurse in the hospital in Dallas. And the devotees told her that you are so frail, your health is not good, why don't you stop working and take retirement? And the same instruction her Guru Maharaj gave her, that you go to Vrindavan to leave your body. So then, rather than committing suicide, leave your body naturally in the environment of Vrindavan, the conducive environment of Vrindavan. So she went there in preparation of leaving her body, in preparation of meeting that finality of death in her life. She went there, and it is described that, just in Vrindavan, being in that atmosphere of devotional life, it was Janmashtami, she had fasted on Janmashtami, and the next day in Prabhupada's appearance day, she actually took a little maha, which was offered to Prabhupada. And she got, some appetite back, she started getting some strength back, and she started eating. And from being bedridden, she got the strength, she started walking. In fact, she did Govardhan Parikrama also, when she regained her strength. And it is said that because, her health started thriving in Vrindavan, she would then start taking devotees even on Parikrama, on Govardhan Parikrama. And, like this, she was able to live her life very nicely in Vrindavan. And then obviously Tamal Krishna Maharaj also realized that she has regained her health. She is not going to leave her body very soon. So he tells her that now you can go back to Dallas and continue your services over there to Radha Kalachandji. And on the way to Dallas, she goes via London. She wanted to meet her Guru Maharaj and then she was going to go to Dallas. And it said that in London, she was again diagnosed with cancer, with throat cancer. And she had to undergo some surgery to remove that cancer. So you see, like one after the other, she was having so many health issues. And then ultimately she said, okay, let me go to Dallas because I know the devotees over there. And all the devotees were lovingly calling her that you come here, we will take care of you. We will ensure you have a beautiful atmosphere here for leaving your body. Because the cancer was terminal. The doctors had told her that you are not going to survive after that cancer. So she regained her health in Vrindavan, but again, this calamity struck in her life. So she goes to Dallas then and she started preparing for her departure very nicely, just to embrace death so that she can prepare for her eternal life after death. And it is said that the devotees had prepared a room and they started doing 24 hours kirtan in her room. And all the devotees, they gave little memories of Kirtida mother. And they all said that when we would go to do kirtan, we thought we are going to support her. That it's okay, don't worry, like we are there, death can happen, what to do. But in the, instead of that, we would get enlivened and come out. Because she was suffering, her body was suffering, but we would ask her, how are you feeling? And she would say, oh, I'm in the best phase of my life. I'm feeling so blissful, I'm feeling so happy. Radha Kalachandji are there and their devotees are looking after me. I have not been in a better position at all than this, what I am in currently. So they would become enlivened looking at her. And it is said that the nurses who were caring for her during that time, she needed obviously care because her body was very weak and diseased. So the nurse started chanting 16 rounds, just being inspired by her life, just being inspired by the way devotees were actually serving her. And even when she died, like it was very hot summer in Dallas when she died, and the devotees had described that they were standing under that, when they went to do cremation, they were standing under the roof and it was a zinc roof, so it had become very hot. And obviously the funeral pyre was there and the fire was burning. So they said that we actually couldn't tolerate it because the temperature was 40-45 degrees, plus we were standing in front of this fire and the heat was getting absorbed by the zinc roof. But still we were able to do kirtan for 5-6 hours non-stop. And they said we all felt empowered just by Mother Kirtida. And looking at her body, like people who had come to pay her their final respects to her, everybody said that her body was glowing. After her death also, her body was glowing. And she was inspiring people even after her death through her effulgence. So this is the way we see devotees actually prepare to leave their body. And this is the way devotees set an example on how to accept this concept, this problem of death, and how to prepare and find a solution to this problem of death. And where do devotees get this inspiration from? All these messages are there in the pages of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. We see when we read Bhagavatam, Bhagavatam does not shy away from telling us about this concept of death. In universities, they shy away. In schools, they don't want children or students to go through we can't discuss, they will go into a trauma or something like that. But Bhagavatam doesn't shy away. Bhagavatam boldly gives us the message of death through many examples of all these, Maharaj Chittaketus and others who left the world, and to tell us how to prepare for this death. So we see devotees when they feel inspired, like, Mother Kirtida, and there are so many other devotees in ISKCON who have left the world in a very exemplary way. And they all drew their inspiration because of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam and the teachings of Bhāgavatam. So yesterday we heard Gopa Vrindesh Prabhu giving us a nice class about, the glories of the distribution of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. So we are getting so much inspiration from Bhāgavatam, and we also want others to get this opportunity to read Śrīmad Bhāgavatam and derive inspiration, and to give them the opportunity to prepare for their life after death, to prepare for death and also to prepare for their eternal life after death. So we have the auspicious occasion of Bhadra Purnima coming up very soon. It's on the 10th of September, and so far we have already distributed 100 sets of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam because of the efforts of all the devotees. And we want to distribute maybe 30 more sets before the 10th of September. So it is a unique opportunity for all of us especially all the grahasthas, because so many new bhakti vrukshas have started, so much preaching is going on there. A new center has started in the western suburbs. It's such a golden opportunity for us to take part in this auspicious occasion that is coming up soon. And it is said that there is going to be a fire sacrifice that is going to be offered at Naimisharanya, exactly the place where Śrīmad Bhāgavatam was spoken. And in that fire sacrifice, every devotee who distributed the Bhagavatam set, their name is going to be chanted for that in that fire sacrifice. And this is being supported by all the GBCs, like all the sannyasis of within ISKCON, Gopal Krishna Maharaj, Jaipataka Maharaj, Devamrit Maharaj, Radhanath Maharaj, all these sannyasis are supporting this drive that we want to distribute as many Śrīmad Bhāgavatam sets as possible. And actually, if we see, today is a very unique day. Today is a very unique opportunity because it's Vinayak Chaturthi, it's Ganesh Chaturthi today. And I know in many houses, like I've already heard devotees are making modak to offer to Lord Ganesh. And we worship Lord Ganesh as the eternal servant of Lord Krishna. And why is it such a beautiful occasion for Śrīmad Bhāgavatam? Because it is Lord Ganesha who was the scribe. Vyasadeva was narrating the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam and Lord Ganesha actually wrote the entire Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. So what a better day than to distribute Śrīmad Bhāgavatam during these today, like Vinayak Chaturthi day, and also during the next 9 days when everybody worships Lord Ganesh in their house. So people will be very receptive if we give this, opportunity to them that it's Ganesh Chaturthi. Lord Ganesh had written Bhagavatam. He wanted it to be available to everybody. And, people will be receptive because everybody loves Lord Ganesh, especially who are coming from the Indian culture. Everybody has a lot of respect. So very nice opportunity for all of us to participate in this Bhagavatam distribution yagya that is being done, and our, temple brahmacharis are driving it so much. So very unique opportunity for all of us also to become part of this historic, moment or this historic thing which happens every year during Bhadra Purnima and participate. And it is said that during Bhadra Purnima, whoever distributes Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, their residence in Golok Vrindavan is assured. It is said in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam itself. So a person who distributes Bhāgavatam, who speaks about Bhāgavatam, who, gives these sets to others and gives them an opportunity to read, for them, their, passage back to Godhead is assured. And I think, Prabhuji, you were telling yesterday, we have, each set is only $300. We have a special pricing, no, right now. So where will we get Śrīmad Bhāgavatam set in $300? It used to be $550, $600 when we all bought years ago. So requesting everyone to please participate in this yagya. We just need 30 more sets. Obviously, if we exceed that, that's really nice, but we need 30 more sets to be distributed before the 10th of September. And today is a very good day to actually start that because it's Ganesh Chaturthi. So we'll end the class here. Granthraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Any questions or comments, corrections? Yes, Mataji. Very nice question, Mataji. So what Prabhupada is referring to as, austerity should be proportional, or it will be proportional to your purity. So if we try to do austerity beyond our purity, we will not be able to sustain that austerity. And Prabhupada is mostly referring to devotional life over here, the austerities that we do in devotional life. So if somehow we artificially imitate somebody gets up at 2:30 and chants, and we try to imitate them, but we have not yet reached that platform where we are able to then, we don't have the taste for chanting, right, let's say. So when you get up at 2:30, obviously it is to chant extra japa, to chant during Brahma Muhurta, let's say. But we don't have that taste yet. We will not be able to survive that. So rather than that, Prabhupada says, it says that, we don't want to be a firecracker in devotional life where, for some time we do something, but then we are gone. Rather, it's a marathon. So, this, like step by step, if we are doing it, where we are actually first developing a taste for chanting, and then slowly our chanting itself is inspiring us to get up early and do, rather than artificially imitating someone. Because we have seen many devotees who come initially in Krishna consciousness, they try to imitate, the lifestyle of other devotees. But because they have still not given up, they have still not understood the philosophy properly, and they have not given up some of their conditioned old habits that they might have, they leave and go away. So fast to come, fast to go, it is said. And that is what Prabhupada means when we talk about austerity in devotional life. So in devotional life, we haven't purified ourselves, then it is very difficult to sustain the austerity. Now coming to the example which you are talking about, so this was during the olden, Satya Yuga, when actually meditation and austerity was the way, because the lifespan was so long for people. So that was one of the ways to achieve your, whatever desires you had. And obviously it was one of the ways to achieve the Supreme Lord as well. So in these particular cases, when we see Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha and Ravana and all of them doing austerities, we also know that it is a Lila of the Lord, because they have been sent to, fight with the Lord. The Lord wanted to have a fight, and therefore his own devotees, Jaya and Vijay, became demons so that the Lord can fight with them. So we see it's part of the Lila as well, that they do these austerities to become strong demons so that the Lord can have like a strong opponent to fight with. But also, that was the recommended way during that time. So people's bodies were designed accordingly. So even though they were doing austerities not for achieving devotional service, but for fulfilling their material desires or something like that, the bodies were also designed in such a way so that they were able to sustain the austerity, because that was the recommended process of that age.
Can we say that purity and austerity that proportion is only applicable in Kali Yuga then?
And in devotional life, both.
The second question, if you allow me, is regarding to the statement when you said, quoting Jagatrini Mataji, that it's nothing wrong to fulfill desires, that there are no against devotional practice.
If we are not able to transcend them, yes.
Yeah, and so I was trying to meditate, reflecting on that in the sense that it's like a snowball. When we try to satisfy some desires, again, that also take us to more and more and more. And so how we can, I would say, set the boundaries for that, and at the same time, know that in the practice process, Krishna consciousness especially, we talk about karma yoga in the sense that whatever we do, whatever we have, we can do it to satisfy our desires, but we offer to Krishna first, and then we use it. So that's the way how we can channel or purify or dovetail our desires. Can be this also proportional, or the way how we can sort of set the boundaries for the way how we can satisfy our desires?
Yes, Mataji. You've answered your own question. So yes, very good realization. So obviously for devotees, when we were talking about the desires of the heart and not suppressing them artificially, so even you have a desire to wear good clothes and trying to suppress them artificially because we think, oh, what will other devotees think if I'm wearing good clothes? Let's say, I'm just giving a simple example. And if it's not contrary, yeah, wear a good sari, wear a good dress, but don't try to do it in a way which is contrary to devotional service. That is what we were trying to say. So we try to use our talents, or we try to use that concept of yukta vairagya. So utilizing things in the service of Krishna and trying to fulfill our desires through that. So somebody has a desire to sing because they have a good voice, Krishna has given them a good voice. Then you sing, devotional bhajans, you sing for Krishna, you sit in the temple, participate in the 12-hour, 24-hour kirtans that happen, and that's how you satisfy the desire of singing. Or somebody has a good desire to watch nice things. So, you might get tempted to watch some other, movies or something like that you are attached to, but also you try to then purify that desire by increasing the proportion of watching devotional things rather than non-devotional things, so that slowly, param drishtva nivartate, so that you are slowly giving up the lower taste and developing the higher taste. But it has to be a process which is going along with your, the purificatory process of chanting. And that is what we meant by artificially suppressing. So if we are the purificatory process of chanting, we are not working on our chanting, then we will see these desires will keep coming up in our heart. And then, like you said, there won't be a boundary. We will keep wanting to fulfill the desires. So we have to keep working on the core principle or philosophy of Krishna consciousness, which is, chanting. Because chanting, Prabhupada says 99% progress in devotional life comes through chanting. And 1% comes through all other things like deity worship and cooking for the Lord. Everything else is just 1%. But 99% progress is through chanting. The quality of chanting that we do. And when we say progress in, becoming detached from our desires, progress in becoming attached to the lotus feet of the Lord. Thank you, Mataji. Yes, Sivya.
Hare Krishna, Mataji, thank you for the nice class. So, Mataji, you said that to gain spiritual instruction, you need to let go of material desires. But you see, in case of Dhruva Maharaj, his desire was to get a kingdom, living in his own father. So, Narad Muni instructed him to go to Madhura and chant the mantra. But in the case of Chitraketu Maharaj, he didn't get any instruction, even though he had a Pradipana. But he had to go through the sad fasting and getting the relaxation. So, how can we understand this?
Very nice question, Sivya. So Sivya is asking that, with Narad Muni, using different techniques to preach. So with Dhruva Maharaj, he actually allowed him to fulfill his material desire. But with Maharaj Chitraketu, or the other way around? With Dhruva Maharaj, he gave him the instructions to do devotional service in Madhuvan. But with Maharaj Chitraketu, he made him go through so much of grief to be able to realize. Is that your question? Yeah, so like I was explaining with Dhruva Maharaj, and that is the expertise of Narad Muni. He is using different techniques for different type of people. So what he used for Dhruva Maharaj will not have worked for Maharaj Chitraketu. And if you read in the previous chapter, Angira Muni is telling Maharaj Chitraketu, he is saying that I could have given you these same instructions before, giving you a son, but you would not have received those instructions well. And we know why he would not have received, because the activities of Maharaj Chitraketu prove that. Maharaj Chitraketu was so desperate to get a son that he married millions of wives. Would anybody do that normally? So you see the desperation he had to get a child, and Angira Muni and Narad Muni could identify that yes, he's very, very hell-bent on getting a child. So first let's give him that, because otherwise he is not going to listen to these instructions. But with Dhruva Maharaj, Narad Muni used a different technique. He challenged his Kshatriya blood and he allowed him to do austerities still to get the kingdom. But he knew when he does the austerities and gets darshan of the Lord, he'll be purified and he will not want that kingdom. So you see, Dhruva Maharaj was prepared because he was a Kshatriya and he was prepared to take that challenge up, whereas Chitraketu Maharaj was so desperate that he married so many wives just to get a child, and still he was not getting. So they knew he is not going to accept these devotional instructions straight away. So they had to allow him to go through the whole experience to then become detached. And we see then he accepts. Later on we will see Narad Muni will give him a mantra. It's called the Mahavidya. So he will give him those mantras to chant. Maharaj Chitraketu will do that, and he has personal darshan of Lord Anantadev. Such beautiful description is there when he has darshan of Lord Anantadev. So in 7 days he had darshan. So you see how Maharaj Chitraketu also achieved the same goal as Dhruva Maharaj. He also got darshan, he also got darshan. But if both of them had to take different paths, because they were on different journeys in Krishna consciousness, their own journeys. Thank you. Okay, we'll end the class here. Granthraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.